for a second. Props to Kev. You're the first one all day. There were like approximately, Cardi, have a seat, okay? Approximately 4 things you could have come up with, but the one that I was thinking of was Supreme Court Justice dying over the weekend. Go ahead, Will.
You said me?
Yeah.
President dragging, or people going up for president dragging each other's name.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff that you could have said. You could have said there was stuff going on with the president and the election coming up. You could have said there was news with like some of the coronavirus stuff. You could have said a bunch of different things that people said in third block and in fourth hour, but nobody said. Actually, one person said something about a Supreme Court justice, but they didn't know. A Supreme Court justice died over the weekend. Which is
Democratic one died. They wanted Trump wants to replace her by the end of the week.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Let's talk first about what is the Supreme Court. Well,
It's the most powerful judicial court. Like, you take all the major problems there, like that one case, like integrated school type of the Supreme Court.
okay, you're 2 steps ahead of me, right? So it's the top of the judicial branch, Omari was saying. They take the highest ranking, like highest level problems that nobody else can figure out how to solve with the law for the court. We were just going to jump into possible court cases that you had heard of. What's up, Kev?
I was just going to mention an example.
Yep.
I forget what the case was called, but
Cardi.
last year at my school, we went on a field trip to watch a movie about some like lawyer who moved down to the South and was defending for death row inmates.
Yep.
And they kept all of the cases kept going higher up the command chain until eventually they got to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so the movie you're talking about is Just Mercy.
Yes, that one.
That lawyer is
Oh,
Brian
yeah.
Stevenson. He argued, he's still a lawyer. He's very much alive right now. He has argued cases in front of the Supreme Court on a couple occasions. A Supreme Court case you probably have heard of, should have heard of, is Brown versus Board of Education. That's the one that Will was talking about that ended segregation in schools. Another big one that's like real famous, you've probably heard of at some point, is Roe versus Wade, which is the case about 50 years ago that legalized abortion. Supreme Court, when their job is to interpret what the law means, not make laws, but to interpret laws. And so they ended school segregation in the 50s, but in the 1800s, they also were in charge of kind of starting segregation and making it legal with what's called separate but equal in a court case called Plessy versus Ferguson in the 1800s.
Supreme Court.
We'll talk,
That was Supreme Court.
that was Supreme Court. We'll talk more about it. Everything in the Supreme Court starts lower and then works its way up there when people go like, is that really the right decision? And the people that get to make the final call are the 9 judges
How much do they get?
on the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about all those things later in the year. So those are great questions to dig into. But those are kind of 3 famous ones, big, huge issues. Tommy, did you have a question a minute ago?
I was saying they shouldn't legalize abortion.
That's a very
Oh,
interesting question to raise. And it's something that, depending on what happens with this court case, will be real interesting. Yeah, Cav.
because the lady who died was Democratic, the president appoints the judges, so he can replace her with a Republican candidate if he wanted to, which I believe he is planning on.
I thought it could be only a certain amount of Democratic people.
Well, okay.
It was
So
Democratic control before, so now if it's a Democrat or Republican he nominates, will control the court, meaning they have majority most of the time. Meaning that depending on who gets set in, whatever Roe versus Wade could get overruled, but could not, who knows?
kind of, there's a lot of ways to look at it. Right now, she was just very old. She was 87.
People expected her to die a lot earlier than she did.
So the Supreme Court judges, they're not like presidents or people in Congress. They get to serve once they're put in. They get put in by the president. And once the president puts them in, they can serve for as long as they want, as long as they don't like break the law and like get in any trouble, they can serve for as long as they want. So she was hoping to serve another year or so, and she was hoping that President Trump was going to lose the election, and then she would retire and let a Democrat appoint a new. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so who can, ain't only like one person that can take them off while they're.
Yeah. So really, unless they break the law, it's their choice how long they want to serve.
So nobody can take them off.
Not really. Once they're on there, you can only impeach a Supreme Court judge and get them off for committing a crime. So once they're on there for as long as they want to be there, till they retire, or until, in many cases, in the last 3 judges have not retired. They've all died in their somewhere between their late 70s and their late 80s. They get pretty old and then they die. Many of them die waiting to, like, hoping that even though the court's not supposed to be political, they die like waiting for a new judge to come in. Same thing happened in 2016. Justice Scalia, who was like a little bit more conservative leaning. Again, the court's not supposed to be Republican or Democrat, so they can just be fair.
Conservative or liberal is what they are.
Yeah. But what ends up happening is it becomes very much similar to the political parties. So in 2016, we're going to see why this is such a big issue right now, to come up like literally right now specifically, instead of just any other time. Tommy, can you get the lights for us? Online, guys, I forgot to put a link on here on Classroom, so sorry. The audio will be good. Hopefully the video doesn't lag too much.
Trump described Justice Ginsburg as, quote, a fighter to the end. He reacted to her death as he left a campaign rally in Minnesota last night. Both he and his election opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, campaigned in the hotly contested state on Friday. Today, the president campaigns in North Carolina, and with the death of Justice Ginsburg, a new election issue. Nicole Killian is in Fayetteville, North Carolina, to continue our coverage. Nicole, good morning.
Good morning to you, Michelle. And news of Justice Ginsburg's passing broke during President Trump's rally last night. He went on for nearly 2 hours before he became aware of what happened. He is expected to campaign here in Fayetteville later today, but make no mistake, this changes the dynamic of the race.
From the White House and Capitol Hill, where flags were lowered at half-staff, to the steps of the Supreme Court. As the nation learned of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, so did President Trump, moments after stepping off the stage at a Minnesota campaign rally.
She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me that for the first time. Actually sad to hear that.
The president released a fuller statement calling Ginsburg a titan of the law, renowned for her brilliant mind and her powerful dissents at the Supreme Court. All of the former living presidents offered condolences.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Bill Clinton, who nominated Ginsburg to the High Court in 1993, wrote, her 27 years on the court exceeded even my highest expectations when I appointed her. Her landmark opinions moved us closer to a more perfect union. Former Vice President Joe Biden said it was an honor to preside over Ginsburg's confirmation hearing.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg stood for all of us.
Fresh off his own campaign stop to Minnesota, he made clear her replacement should be decided after the election.
This was the position of the Republican Senate took in 2016 when there were almost 10 months to go before the election. That's the position the United States Senate must take today.
Today I am nominating Chief Judge Merrick Brian Garland.
Many Democrats are still reeling after the GOP-led Senate passed over Obama nominee Merrick Garland. The president has already named 2 justices to the bench. Friday night, he touted his latest list of potential candidates.
There's about 45 unbelievable people. Unbelievable, the smartest, the best, the absolute creme de la creme, right? The best minds in the country.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the Senate floor, although he did not specify a timetable. But trying to do this before the election could be tricky. On average, it takes about 69 days to get through the confirmation process, and there's just 45 days left until the general election. Dana?
Nicole, thank you.
Okay, so right
President
now,
Trump described.
big issue. Couple questions that came up. First, Tommy, you noticed when was Ruth? 1993. 1993. Just one number missed. That's okay. 1993. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was appointed. She was only the second woman in the history of the Supreme Court. Every other judge on the court has been a man, other than 4. She was number 2 of the women all time. So right now, actually the court is about as, well, until she died, the court was as diverse as it had ever been, really, which is crazy to think about, but it had 3 women out of 9. It had, it currently has a black justice and 2 Hispanic justices, and that is as diverse as it has ever been. So most of the court is generally super old, super white, and super dudes. 4 women in the history of the court. She's only the second one. 1993, she served for 27 years, which means she's been on the court longer than almost all the people in this building have been alive. Only staff, and not every staff. Some of the staff and every single student in this building, none of you were even thoughts when she got on the court, which is kind of crazy to think about. She was there for 27 years. Will, and then Kev.
I'm confused. How does this really, they said it's going to make a big impact on
Yeah.
So who's the next person? How will that do that?
Huge. All right, so here's what happened. They were talking a little bit about it in the video. In 2016, when President Obama was finishing, he had almost a year left. He had 10 months left. Remember, they only served for 4 years. He had almost a whole year left when the last Supreme Court justice that, while he was president, died. The Republicans are in charge of, so the president gets to pick somebody, but then they have to send it to Congress to get them approved. They just vote yes or no. It's not a choice between 2 people. It's just this person, yes or no. They said, we're not going to vote on whoever you pick. We think the next president should get to pick this Supreme Court judge. Why? Because he was a Democrat and Congress was controlled by Republicans. And so they said, we are going to gamble and we're going to hope that we win the presidential election and then a Republican gets to pick the judge instead of a Democrat. So they played politics. Now they're in the same situation where last time this happened, they said, we should wait until after the election, let the people decide on a president, and then let that president decide who's going to be it. Except this time, what are they saying? The same people are saying, let's do it now. Okay, it'd be the fastest it's ever been done. Let's do it now.
Oh, before he gets.
Before the Republican, so the Republican Congress is saying, we want a Republican to choose, no matter how fast we got to do it, even if it's the fastest in history. Let's push somebody through. And so people are hearing this going, wait a second. You're just trying to have power and control. You don't care about fair. Last time you said this is about fair, but turns out that's BS. You just want your side to have power. That's all you care about. Kev.
At least this morning, mentioned the 45 candidates. This morning sometime, he mentioned on Twitter that he narrowed it down to 5 people, and all of them are female. So
There you go.
second off, they mentioned Fayetteville, I think it was called.
Uh-huh.
Is that named after Lafayette? Because it sounds a lot like his name.
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into the history. Tommy, can you get the lights for us? So big thing to be kind of thinking about. Like they said, they said 45, but this video is already 2 days old because it was from Saturday morning. And so, or Saturday night. So there's only 43 days left until our presidential election. If they, 43 days, November, first week in November. It's the Tuesday after the first Monday in November of even numbered years. 43 days until our presidential election, and they want to see if they can get a judge approved in the next. On average, it takes 10 weeks. So 69 days is 1 day less than 10 weeks. On average, it takes 10 weeks. They want to see if they can do it in 6. Amid all this political pressure, it will be very interesting to see how this goes and how it impacts, if it happens, how it impacts people's thoughts about who they should vote for.
Could they use COVID as a reason to rush a new justice in? Because, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we need to get somebody in there now.
So what I have heard some people arguing or like making the case for is that they have to do it because there's so much controversy around this election. They're worried that what if there is a Supreme Court case about the presidential election and there's only 8 judges. Now, they can't decide on the election, but they can decide on things like when Mr. Smith and I were little kids, when George Bush got elected, there was real controversy over some of the ballots in Florida, and they were worried that the count wasn't right. And so they like had to do this big recount, and there was a Supreme Court case because they sued each other. And because it was about the president, that's one of the things that can go right to the Supreme Court right away. And so the Supreme Court got to decide if there was going to be a recount and like figure some things out there. That's what they're kind of worried about. However, a lot of that is just like somebody saying something to get their point to sound better.
So how long does it take to make your case for the
Ooh, good question. We're going to talk about that this spring. It takes a long time. All right, everybody head to Perusal. We are picking up on the assignment, which is called Biblical Examples. Today, we're going to look at 5 examples of times in the Bible where politics have come up and people have done something politically
All kings.
as characters in the Bible. Yes, there's a whole book about it, but these are like outside of that, some different examples. So head to Perusal. The assignment on there is called Biblical Examples. It starts on page 5, but it starts on like literally the bottom of page 5. We did page 4 and 5 for homework last Wednesday. All this part we kind of already did. We are picking up with the last 2 sentences on page 5, and then we're reading mostly just page 6 and one little blurb on page 7. So we're heading there. Online, guys, I'd love to have one of you read at some point today. I don't want to like make it a big thing, but I'd love to have one of you read at some point today. We're going to start with these first 2 sentences up here, and then we're going to jump into the 5 stories. So we'll have 6 chances total for somebody to read. What's up, Will? You want to read? All right, go ahead.
Christians aren't limited to analyzing our relationship with the public square solely in theory or abstract application. The Bible itself provides us with several consciences, examples of righteous people who use politics to further the will of God and other neighborhoods.
Okay, you might be finishing up getting there. If you're finishing up getting there, that's okay. I see a couple guys online that are getting there right now. So get there as quick as you can. If you can't see it, once we start reading the first story, which is Joseph, just pause and either move up if you're in the room or follow along on my screen if you are online. That's okay. I don't want you to like miss what's going on to be hunting around for it on your computer. So find it the next 30 seconds while I'm stalling for you talking, or pause once we get there. We're going to read 5 stories of people, not like the Bible story, but them kind of like explaining a little bit about what's happening. Pay attention to be with us. We always say, don't do your annotations right now. Today, I like really mean that, because there's going to be some extra like information that if you pay attention here, you'll get half of your homework done just by listening and paying attention to what's up while we're going through these, talking through them. We are on, it's called Biblical Examples is the assignment on perusal. Otherwise, if you go to the library, it's just CNC chapter 1, and we're on the bottom of page 5. Actually, now we're starting page 6. All right, at this point, I think I have stalled just long enough that one or two last folks are getting there. The first story we're going to read is about Joseph, talking through Joseph and some of his deal with what's going on with politics. As we read each of these stories, think about what's their connection to politics and kind of what happens with them related to government or things related to government. Joseph is the first one. Who wants that first one? Go ahead, Will. You can take that one. I got Tommy next, and then I got Cardi after that one. Online, guys, I'd love to get you for one of those last two. Somebody. Go ahead, Will.
After Joseph's brother sold him to slavery in Egypt, and he was in prison for a crime he didn't commit, Joseph will actually
Interpret. Yeah, you got it. Pharaoh, the next one.
interpret Pharaoh's dream. I gotta read all that.
You don't have to read all that. So great question. Guys, when we get to stuff in the parentheses, it's the Bible verses. You can read those. Never feel like you have to read those. If it's something besides a reference to a Bible verse, you should read it. If it's just a Bible verse, they're doing that so that you can have it there for your annotations. It's a great thing to put in. You don't have to read it necessarily here. What we do see is that there are 4 different spots. The story of Joseph is pretty long and pretty big and important in the Bible. So make sure you're there with that. Tommy, don't create your own racing car, okay? Create your own understanding of how the government works. Thanks, Bob. Go ahead, Will.
After successfully interpreting dreams from Pharaoh, Joseph was considered a man of discernment and was put in charge of the whole land of Egypt. This was a government position of great authority that forced Joseph to make some tough political decisions. Joseph traveled around Egypt to understand the way of the land, familiarize himself with the doctrine and understanding. He created a strategy for processes for surviving
The famine.
famine.
Yeah, famine's when there's no food.
During the 7 years of absence, he collected all the food produced and stored it. When the 7 years of famine began, Egypt was able to survive it because of Joseph's plan. They were also able to send grain to famished people.
All right. What happens with Joseph? Tommy? Yeah. So God tells him there's going to be this big famine, right? He comes up with an idea for how to take care of it. You're going to say more, Eb? You're going to say more or no? All right. He worked for who? He worked for Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the king of Egypt, king kind of like a president. So he works for the government. He came up with this government food program, kind of like food stamps, based like EBT 5,000 years before EBT, right? He went like, oh snap, we're gonna need 7 years worth of food. And he helped the government put together a program, and he ran a government food supply program for the whole country of Egypt, and more or less like the whole kind of Middle East. People started coming to Egypt when they all started running out of food. A famine is time where there is no food because the crops aren't growing. So he runs this big government food program for 15 years in Egypt to make sure that the people don't starve to death and that the Egyptians can make bank off of this whole thing. All right. Next one. Tommy, you had it? You wanted it, right? Moses?
After going up in Pharaoh's family, and later choosing to embrace the new evil years, Moses was shown by God to rule the people out of slavery. Moses was hesitant to accept this condition, but he thought he was inadequate. As part of this community, he had to confront Pharaoh and attempt to convince him to release the people from captivity. In essence, Moses was using his own entitlement to Pharaoh to do his calculation. which is what the nation that all of us have very implications. We also have to deal with the impact of the people and fail to reduce their labor, reduce work and demand. One is faith in God, who is willing to confront them and like we have relation,
Yeah, liberation.
relation of the people.
All right. What is Moses' job? What does Moses do? Tommy? He what? This is Old Testament. Serving God. What's he doing specifically, Calf?
He's trying to convince Pharaoh to let the Israelite people go.
Yeah, he's trying to get these people who are all in slavery in Egypt up out of there. He's trying to get them out of slavery in Egypt. All right. What's he got to do to make that happen? Yeah, he's got to talk about this whole thing with Pharaoh and try and get them out of captivity. If you know the story, what does that take? What are the steps in between there? Will? He does all kinds of wild stuff, right? God says, like, all right, fine, I'm gonna give you, there's all these plagues that they call them, all these things that they're gonna do to make sure, right? He throws the staff, yeah, the staff turns into a snake, but then they go through 10 plagues, right? And I'm gonna make a case. So Moses, he's doing some pretty political stuff, talking to the king about like ending slavery. It's kind of a big deal. But then also, Moses, I think you could make a strong case, also involved in some terrorism a little bit. Now, we just talked about 9/11, so not like that kind of terrorism, but kind of. Because terrorism, if you look at like the dictionary definition of a word, it's political action that's brought about by violence. So what does Moses do? He like turns the water into blood. God kills all their animals, ruins all their crops, goes around in the last one and kills their oldest son from every family. Sounds to me like terrorism. Go ahead, Will. Kind of in a way, right? They used violence to bring about, and not like they didn't. So it's complicated, right? Because God did all the stuff. Moses didn't do any of the stuff, right? Moses wasn't blowing up pyramids in Egypt. But there was terror reigning on Egypt until they got what God was saying they were going to get, which is get these people out of here, get them their freedom. I want the Hebrews out of Egypt. So political action there too. Kev?
Well, one, can I read Daniel's section also? Second, although with Moses' case, it is slightly different because God told him to do it, not like
Totally.
Trying to make an actual political point.
So here's the caveat, right? Is that it's muddy water at best to say it's terrorism, although like if you look at the definitions of the words, however, it comes down to at the end of the day, who's doing it, right? God is saying, hey, you're gonna do this, and then when it didn't happen, God brings judgment on it. That's a little bit different than us going like, all right, we want our own country and we're gonna start bombing some people to get it. It's a little different, but not totally. It's just in levels of like who controls it. Cardi, you want to read or you got something to say? Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't say anything when he asked for Daniel, right? So Daniel, you can hit the next one, and then we'll get somebody online to do Paul at the very end. Cardi's gonna take Daniel. Go ahead.
After King Nebuchadnezzar decided Jerusalem, he took his most time to empty and welcome into his
Babylonian
kingdom. Daniel was one of the young people the king tried to endure and
indoctrinate. Yeah, that means like get to think the way he wants them to think.
But when he stood up to the king and prophecy requiring him to do so. Furthermore, Daniel worked with the king by interpreting his dreams, giving a high position as ruler over entitled prophets or government, and placed in charge for all Israel. In a place with political pressure, Daniel refused to be defiled himself, but he refused to accept the political position from which he could do good for him.
All right, what does Daniel do? He stands up to the king, right? Famous story that Daniel is from like the little kid's Bible. If you ever read the little kid's Bible story.
Yeah, I mean, when he got, the name's King people, but he was like two-faced.
Different story. Well, the king was, yeah, but Daniel got famous for Daniel he had a run in with some circus animals.
Lion's Den.
Daniel in the lion's den, right? So the king said, hey, you're only going to pray to me. He got tricked into this rule, but long story short, he says, like, you can only pray to the king. Daniel says, no. He stands up to the king one of many times that he says, I'm not going to do that. He stands up to the king and says, that's a cool law, but I got to follow God. This whole book has been telling us so far, if your politics come before your faith and your Christianity, then like your faith is garbage. You got to have that faith first. And Daniel, he was living that out. He said, nah, throw me in the lion's den. They did. He comes out of the lion's den and he's like the king's best friend. And so Daniel becomes like a high ranking government official in Babylon. Ed, were you going to say something a minute ago?
I was about to say, I remember there was a passage about the 3 men being thrown in the furnace of fire.
Yep.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
All good buddies of Daniel. Living the same life basically that Daniel's living at the very same time. They're all good buddies. Cav.
Province is like a mixture between like our states and like a kingdom, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So the king was so impressed by somebody saying, yeah, I know you're the king, but I'm not just going to like do whatever you say just because you're the king. I'm going to do the thing that's right. The king went, whoa, snap. I need less yes men and I need more smart dudes who are going to like call me on my crap when it's crap. And so Daniel goes like shooting up the ranks in Babylon.
Wait, so he liked him defiant?
Yeah, because he wasn't like,
He chucked him in the lion's den first.
but the whole time he was upset about it because he knew, man, this guy, like, he's not just gonna, because the king liked Daniel. He knew that like this was a dude who is always gonna tell the truth and have integrity and shoot you straight. And people that are in authority, they get used to everybody just saying like yes to whatever they want. And that sounds cool at first, but eventually you go like, nah, y'all are fake. Like I want somebody who's gonna tell me. That's why I like Tommy, because I know Tommy ain't gonna BS me. We might butt heads every once in a while, but I know Tommy's not going to BS you, right? And that's exactly what the king of Babylon wanted. He wanted Daniel, who was going to tell him the truth, even if it hurt, instead of like some fake person that was just going to say like, oh yeah, you're the king. I'll do whatever you want. That's a good idea. Yeah, we should kill all of our people. Yeah, that's a great idea, king. No, it's a terrible idea. Somebody should say that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. It's wrong. And here's why. I don't care that you're the king. It's wrong. And so the king loved that Daniel gets into some pretty powerful positions because he's willing to stand up and speak truth to power. Kind of a big deal. You wanted the next one?
Yes, but I also have one question.
Go ahead, Kev.
Since he felt like remorse for when he threw Daniel in the lion's den, was in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, was he sad about chucking them in a furnace? I don't remember that part.
That's a good question. I know that actually, I do know the answer to that because I believe, if I'm remembering the story right, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in the fire and they're definitely not burning, the king calls them out of there. And then I believe they throw, I'm trying to remember. I was going to say they threw some of the other guys in, but maybe I'm just misremembering because I know that in the story it says some of the guards that were bringing them in there, they died because the fire was so hot. Tommy. How did Moses die? Moses, dude, this is great. Let's table that one for 12 minutes and we're going to come back to it in 12 minutes because that's a crazy story. All right, everybody should at least kind of know the story of Nehemiah. We're going to jump into that one first. Cal's going to get it. These are great questions that I love. Literally, we are going to run out of time though, and I want to make sure we hit everything. So write those down. Keep them for 12 minutes. How did Moses die? And whatever Will wants to get to. 12 minutes from now, we got Cav, Ezra, and Nehemiah.
Ezra and Nehemiah were central figures in Israel's return from Babylonian exile.
Where they had just been with Daniel. Keep going.
Ezra worked with the Persian king to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, Ezra 1:1. And Nehemiah worked to rebuild the wall, Nehemiah 2, verses 17 to 18. Neither man could have accomplished this task without engaging government and the political square. Both men endured discouragement and political opposition, but was determined to prevent them from doing a great project for God. Nehemiah 6:3. Also see Ezra 4:8-24. Nehemiah 4. They both preserved and advocated to continue with God's work. They used secular governments and political mechanics to do God's business.
So Nehemiah works for the king. He finds out the wall's broken down because when all these people got taken to Babylon, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and all those guys, when they got taken to Babylon, the Babylonian king knocked down their wall, which is what you needed to protect folks. Nehemiah goes, shoot, we got to help some refugees in a foreign land, which is a thing that governments do a lot. We, the United States, spend a lot of money helping people on other sides of the world try and get better. Last time there was a big hurricane, the world raised billions of dollars to help people fight against recovering from the hurricane. This is kind of like that, where they said, these people are in trouble because back then you needed a wall to protect your city and your people. So we got to protect them. And Nehemiah went through talking to the king to figure out, can we get some money to help out these folks who need some help? It's a big deal. Cardi, do you have a question? What was your question? As soon as we're out of here in 8 minutes. You'll survive. All right, guys that are online, can somebody read that last chunk for us, which is about Paul, our shortest one?
I'll read it.
All right, thanks, Mom.
Wait, where's that? Paul was a Roman?
Yep.
Paul was a Roman citizen, and he used his, Paul is a Roman citizen, and he used his citizenship, a political designation, to further his God-given commission. After being eaten by government authorities in Philippi, he informed them that he was a Roman citizen. This was a major revelation that forced him to let him go, but he wouldn't accept a secret release. Paul made them escort him out of the city to make a public statement that would give the Philippian church some relief and encouragement. Instead of using his political influence for self-preservation and his own benefit, he used it to further the mission of the church.
Perfect. Thanks, Vaughn. So, Paul, kind of 5-second backstory on Paul. Anybody? Yeah, used to be. Used to kill Christians. So Jesus comes and says hey, you got to knock it off. Stop killing Christians. Changes his name. Yeah, absolutely. So Paul goes out preaching the gospel and he becomes a Christian. He's all about that. In that's not always a popular position. He got thrown in jail a few times. He got beat up. He got stoned almost to death. He eventually got killed, got martyred for being a Christian. In this particular situation, Paul was a Roman citizen. Citizenship is a government thing. At the end of the year, we're going to take the citizenship test, which is required to become a citizen of the United States and is required for every high school graduate in the state of Wisconsin by the state law. So citizenship is a government thing. Yeah, we'll talk more about it later. But he was a Roman citizen. They had laws and justice kind of like we do, where like you couldn't just take a citizen off the street, beat him up, and throw him in jail. So they grabbed Paul. Yeah, I know, Tommy. Like, I'm just saying what the law says, not exactly how it plays out, right? So just like sometimes that plays out differently now, same thing happened with Paul, where Paul, because he was a Christian, he was talking about the gospel in Philippi. They pull him off the street. The soldiers beat him down, and they throw him in jail. He should have seen it coming, and he did see it coming because it wasn't the first time. But now that he's beat down and thrown in jail, he waits till after that's all happened, and then now that he's in jail, he says basically like, yo, I need a lawyer. Because, by the way, I'm a Roman citizen, and y'all can't treat me like that. And all of a sudden they go, oh, snap. And they knew, like, all these soldiers know, like, oh, we're in big trouble. And so we just talked last week about the Breonna Taylor settlement and all the money that came in and how they'd rather have their kid, but the settlement's nice because it proves that the government is saying, like, shoot, we made a mistake. Paul makes them do the same thing. They try to sneak him out of the jail and like just let him go. And he said, oh, no. That's not how this is going to go down. How this is going to go down is you're going to publicly say that you guys screwed up and you shouldn't be treating us like this. And it was a pretty huge thing for that to happen. Cap.
Just when you mentioned that Romans were given like the right to a lawyer, wasn't that originally
Yeah, when I'm talking about a lawyer, I just mean like that's what somebody would say now. Yo, I need a lawyer. He didn't say he needed a lawyer. He just said you guys couldn't do that because I'm a Roman citizen.
say, hey,
Similar.
this is illegal. You can't do this.
Tommy? I know. It's confusing. We'll figure it out. All right. We only got 5 minutes, so we got to work quick. Usually what we would do right now is jump into time for you guys to annotate, but Will, stick with me. What we're going to do for annotations and for homework, we just walked through all 5 of these and kind of gave a summary of it. If you were listening and paying attention, then you should have kind of an idea of what happened with each one of these dudes. For your annotations, which I'm going to give you time to start in a minute, there's 2 things going on. You got to have 10 to 15 anyways. Let me give you 5 free ones. Yeah, we're talking homework right now. Annotations, right? Annotations are always homework. We're doing 10 to 15 on perusal. I'm going to give you 5 free ones right now. Go to each one of these 5 stories and just write a 1-sentence summary of what happened with that person and how they are connected to politics. And then 2 things with this. Number 1, that's part of your annotations and you kind of get a freebie. Number 2, here's a second piece of your homework, which we're going to talk about first thing tomorrow, which is this assignment right here, which is super easy. There's a Google form and it's going to ask you 5 questions. The questions are, how was Joseph connected to politics? How was Moses connected to politics? How was Daniel connected to politics? How were Ezra and Nehemiah together as one connected to politics? And how was Paul connected to politics? Which, guys, we literally just talked about. So write 1 sentence in your perusal summarizing each thing. That counts for 5. And then literally, don't overwork yourself. Just copy and paste each of those 5 sentences into the Google form right there. You have 4 minutes right now to start on that. So I know it's tempting, Tommy Jackson, to put your computer away and shut her down, but take 4 minutes to write at least 1 or 2 of those summaries about what happened, because then you got a head start on homework for tomorrow. So grab your Chromebook and jump back in for 3 more minutes with us. Cap.
Can we separate Ezra and Nehemiah stories into 2 separate ones?
You can on perusal, you can't on here. On the Google form, I want them together, just simple how we did it. But to count it as annotations, absolutely, go ahead. All right, then I'm gonna help you with that right now. And then I know, you gotta get that fixed. Let me help you out. As
soon as you know that, then we'll get you going on air. Oh, no, yeah, that's my bad. Okay, so we'll work that out. You got like file missing time. Says you have, I know. All the time. You can fight it in your room. Whoever did this like giant highlight. You did that. That sucks. In the future, guys, highlight as little as possible so that other guys can get in and pick their spots, not as much as possible. That is, Yep. 10, you got in 10 to 15 things through there. So that would get you 5 of them if you only did that part, Tommy. Yes. What's up, Andre?
Remember the myth of the group comes based off of it. Very similar to how the lawyer and yeah, jury originating from Greece, having a jury of lawyers.
What do you do, guys?
Okay. You stand out. Now I'm gonna get plenty of times on how to work.
My man.
My connection messed up, but I'm gonna do my work.
Okay. All right, Andre.
When I was at home, all I see, oh, damn, I couldn't, it was just, it's something wrong. I could feel it. It wasn't trying to work anymore again.